everyone. Welcome to the Ashley Barlow Company podcast. I'm Ashley Barlow, your host. If you are a parent, a teacher, or someone who works at a school, or you're a community member, a volunteer, or a staff member at an organization that supports people with special education plans, a coach, a tutor, or even a grandparent, you're in the right place. Sit back with an ice-cold glass of lemonade, put on your walking shoes and grab some headphones, roll down the windows and cruise. Ready, set, go. Educate, advocate, collaborate.
Hi, friend.
Hello.
Yay. We have been trying to do this for a second, and I am so excited to introduce you to my audience. Everybody, this is Marissa Rothermel. Marissa is one of our amazing tutors over at the Tutoring Center. And this summer, I tried to do podcast interviews with all of the tutors, and guess what? We got too busy at the Tutoring Center and in our other projects. And so that's a good thing to have. But Marissa and I are still kicking at the Tutoring Center, and I wanted to introduce her to you guys. So why don't you give a better, more thorough introduction, friend?
Oh goodness. Jack of all trades? No, that's not true. Special education behavior enthusiast. I'm here on the Ashley Barlow team as I would call it a behavior consultant above all else. I, work with families navigating the school environment and the home communication and what you can do for school, what you can do for home, and how it can all come together and how we can all sit down at a table and come to agreements that work for a child on a very individual level. Because if there's one thing we all know about behaviors is that there is no program or script or like magic trick that's going to get a kid who's got some behavior stuff going on back on track. And that's what I'm here to help get everybody talking about. And it's a lot of fun along the way. You get to work really closely with families, get to work with a lot of different schools across the country, and get everybody working together.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we're doing. That's
It
so
is. It's a lot of
good. And
fun.
just that little introduction is exactly why you're here, because I said introduce yourself and you're like, yeah, behavior, behavior, behavior.
It's
And
true.
like, but we don't even know what you've done. And that's like kind of the whole thing, right? Like we are here to service our clients and to collaboratively work through issues. But why don't you tell everybody what your professional background is too, just so we can
Oh, goodness. Special education teacher, consulting teacher. I've worked in mostly self contained classrooms throughout my entire life, whether they are located in a self contained building or whether they are in a public school setting. I've dabbled in basically every age group that receives services. So you're talking birth through 21 if you're in New York State, which is where I was originally educated, though I love to hear that across the country we're seeing services extended now to much older than 21. I believe, is in Ohio one of them, Ashley? Aren't you? I thought that they were moving those to
Oh,
24. I think I heard 24. Don't quote me, but
oh,
I know that a few different states are looking at 24 and even
hmm.
26 years old for public education for students with disabilities at this point. So it's pretty
I
exciting.
don't know that that's happened in Ohio, but I mean, I know that trend is happening, and
Yeah.
that's really exciting. So
Yeah, I've heard it kicked around in quite a few states at this point. So we'll see what comes down the pike. But it's very, very exciting to help be a part of getting kids of all age levels the services that they need, and that's what I've been doing. So it on the side, I do some consulting work through my own agency, and we just kind of meet the needs of what comes across our purview, whether it's in a school setting or helping out families getting the support that they need.
yeah, and I think that's something that's really exciting and noteworthy is that you and I connected first because of the ABC course,
Mhm,
and I think I remember that the ABC course, the thing that was most intriguing to you was the business aspect of it. Like,
mhm.
special education, you're naturally a great advocate because you are so collaborative, but it was really kind of that business piece of it that you were like, "I need help learning how to set up a business and how to operate a business," and of my students, you are definitely in the top tier of people that have taken that business advice and really kind of run with it. Started your LLC and consulted with professionals about insurance and legal and all of this stuff. And you got your website going and your logos and so I think it's cool when we can take like our skill set and add on to our skill set, add whatever we need that's lacking or bolster what we already know.
Well, I think
And
that's how you found me
yeah,
originally. You said, I need someone for behavior. And I was like, oh, hey, me right here. I do behavior. That's my thing. Let's do something
right,
together. And it's been a
right,
party ever
right.
since.
It's been a party ever since. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and I just think that you're awesome that way. So we started off this summer thinking we would do basically like more classes and group things at the tutoring center. And not surprisingly, those did not take off the way that we had hoped they would. But, when you're trying to get kids from all across the country to all be available on a Tuesday at 10 o'clock Eastern, the chances of that working out are not super good. And so what's ended up happening is you've done a lot of one-on-one consults. Let's say like somebody comes in to you, Marissa, and I don't intend for this to necessarily be like a commercial for the tutoring center. I would like to talk about like best practices. So let's say you have a kid who's an elementary schooler and struggling with behavior, and it's starting to impact their educational placement. So either, the school is saying, you need to go over here, you need to get out of the classroom because you're bugging everybody else, or like it's an actual change of placement situation. What would you do first with these parents? Like, walk us through what the beginning stages would look like.
Well, the first step is I want to know everybody's point of view. I want to hear what the parents are seeing at home. I want to see what documentation has been provided by the school. I want to see what's been tried. What works at home, what works at school, what doesn't work in either setting, what documentation shows a lengthy basically system of interventions that have helped this child find success within their current program. Is there a behavior plan? Is there a crisis management plan? What does school and home communication look like? Are we looking at what happens before an event, what the event looked like while it happened, and what happened afterward? It's kind of doing that data gathering at first and honoring that everybody feels kind of frustrated at this point, right? Not only is the child frustrated and acting out, but the parents don't want to be getting phone calls and notebooks home saying, oh, my kid's having a hard time at school. And the school's struggling to come up with how can we help this child succeed educationally and be a part of the classroom community. So it's taking all of those pieces together, putting it in kind of that package to say, here's what we have collectively from an outsider's view. How can we move forward together? And whether it could be offering suggestions to the school, sitting down at the table with the family and talking about, here are some things that we could try. Really taking a look at sensory is kind of the avenue I've been going down a lot because sensory integration in the classroom is huge for kids, especially post pandemic, right? We have kids that stayed home for a year or two longer, and they don't know how to not be overwhelmed in a classroom anymore. And that's every child, not just a child who has, a unique disability. So looking at the sensory things, making sure that the environment really is set up for success and the basic needs are met before we say, oh, this kid can't come here anymore. So it's building that case to say, what have we done? Where can we go? And is this the best or only option that we have left? So
And
it's a
using
lot of fun.
evaluations, right? Like, what kinds of things would we evaluate if we saw this happening? Like, what kind of objective data would we also get?
Well, a lot of it has to do with, building that basic behavior support plan and looking at, I really focus on the events. I want the information about what time of day are things happening, who is there, what was asked of them, down to the specific word, how was it asked of them, how did they respond, and what did they get out of it, right? So I'm not the person who's going to sit there and say, hey, we're going to use this program to look at this child, or I'm not going to promise that we're going to use this particular way of approaching something because every child is different. And I'm going to look at what they need based on what I'm seeing happen in the classroom.
Right.
So,
And I think that's so important because a lot of times we as parents know we know. We know it's triggering to them. We
Yep.
know. But if we can get down to that like micro detail level and we can keep it objective, so then our advocacy can be stronger because, first of all, we've asked a bunch of questions. So we don't go in there like explaining to them what every step that they've done wrong because we know our kids. And also, we can get down to details like how to say the same thing in a way that isn't triggering to a kid, or what time of day we want to do certain activities and avoid others. And if we can get there, we can avoid those big other problems like the human themselves is a trigger to the child,
Right.
or the environment itself is a trigger to the child. And like that's not a negotiation strategy that's taught that often, but it's just effective. And like you almost have to kind of feel your way around that, don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a lot of what makes, working with students who have behaviors like a finesse or an art is, figuring out what makes them tick. Long time ago, I kind of coined the phrase be the cookie. And be the cookie is the approach that I like to teach every classroom, set of instructional assistants, paraprofessionals, teachers' aides, whatever you call them in yours. But when I get a new classroom team, I like to say, all right, we're going to practice be the cookie for the first couple weeks. And what that means is you need to get each individual child to think you're the cookie, you're the thing they want. How do you form that bond with them so that if a behavior starts to occur, you're able to redirect? But that takes effort because kids don't always naturally want to listen to you, right? Like you need to
Right.
form the bond first. And that's the basis of every behavior is do they kids feel trusted,
Yes.
safe, and like that they're in an okay space. And from there we can pull out the behavior support components that they need.
I think that's
So
super true. So much of the time, there's a trust fall between student and adult. And that's really hard to explain to adults. I mean, I say all the time, but half the reason I'm hired is to say the uncomfortable things. So I'm just going
mhm,
to tell you that he doesn't feel like you got his back, and then you've got to go in and explain. And that's why those micro details are, again, so important because if you say that generally, you're going to do nothing but piss everybody off. I
exactly.
can say, like, here are 4 examples of when it broke down specifically, and here are ideas for how we can avoid that breakdown, then we're gonna get we're more likely to get solutions. I mean, we don't
Yeah.
always, but we're more likely
No.
to get solutions. So, yeah, and you're so, so good at that. I mean, you really are. Like I think the reason is because not only do you have those advocacy skills, but you really understand behavior.
Yeah,
What
and
do
I've
we
got a classroom, and I think the biggest thing that I say to and I didn't mean to cut you off, I
No,
apologize, but
no,
the
no.
thing that I say to so many people is that, you know, every parent sends their school or every parent sends their child to school wanting their kid to be safe, loved, and educated, right? So safety should be a given. Loved sometimes takes a little bit of oomph to make happen. So one of the things that I really like to do, and I encourage all parents to do this all the time, everywhere, is that if a kid's starting in a new classroom, make the cheat sheet. You're the parent. You
Yeah,
know your kid. List a couple
yeah,
things that they could always talk about. A few favorite things. If you know they have a trigger, put that on there. Like never ever talk about whatever it is. And sending in that cheat sheet over of your child helps so much because it's your snapshot. It's your student snapshot. And I, as a teacher, create them if they don't exist. But I encourage every parent to be part of that process and say, like, this is my
yeah,
kid. Love
yeah.
them, and
And
we're gonna
even
find success.
right, and even if you don't have the time to do an All About Me book or that's not your jam, that one pager, like my All About Me
Mhm.
book is in the communication template. I think it's called Back to School Communication Guide, but it says, like, "Don't have the time?" A one pager is a great idea, and Marissa, what I tell people as a teacher is, my goal every year, and it was a really, really easy goal, I always met it, but it was to literally know everybody's names by Halloween.
Yeah.
So that has nothing to do with behavior plans or interests or strategies or anything else. It was to know their names. And again, I totally knock that out of the ballpark. But think about how many kids are on your kids' caseload and how many behaviors they're managing and how many, different curricula they have to implement and modifications for so many different kids. And then you're saying, well, my kid doesn't have a sense of belonging here, doesn't feel loved, doesn't feel appreciated. And all you had to do was talk about Legos. Like,
Right.
well, then tell me I have to talk about Legos.
Right.
So, yeah, like you are giving them the key to building those relationships.
And relationships are the foundation of success across the board. I mean, that's just daily
Oh,
life.
yeah,
Um,
that's it. Well, I mean, you're right. And I'm so happy that you talked about loved because in divorce work, I used to say at the end of the day, like the law, according to Ashley Barlow, is I like boil the laws about child custody and parenting time down. Basically, there's two things that kids have to experience. They have to logically, objectively be safe, and they have to feel loved. And love has like such a different definition for everybody. But as I look at like the best interest standard, and again, I used to practice divorce work in Ohio and Kentucky. I'm no longer active in Ohio. I let my license go inactive, and I feel so empowered by
Agreed.
it. Yeah, I'm not
Oh,
see you later, continuing ed. I but, you know, that is such an important concept just to feel loved, to feel appreciated, to feel a home, to feel understood. I think it means so much. And I say it in schools all the time now.
mhm,
They don't feel loved. They don't feel like you got your back. They don't feel a home. They don't feel a belonging. And that so much of that is kind of an inclusion thing
mhm,
because these kids with behaviors, whether they're annoying human behaviors or they're problematic, dangerous, aggressive,
mhm.
unsafe behaviors, that affects your placement.
It does.
And if your placement changes, then your home changes. And you've got to feel loved in your home. You've got to feel safe in your home. You've got to feel safe at school. And that means having a trusted person. It means having a space in which you feel like you can decompress and also engage, all of those things. And if we don't create those environments and those relationships, then kids aren't going to succeed, right?
And the thing about behavior, and that's the piece I remind everybody at nauseum, is that every behavior has a purpose. The kid is getting something out of this behavior. Whether it's, attention or avoiding something or escaping something or whatever it is. And I think that's the piece that after time, people start taking personally these behaviors. They start being like, "Oh, well, the kid does it because he doesn't like it." And I was like, it's not that. It's what is it? And that's part of what the work that I do is sitting there and saying, "What's the kid gaining? Right? What are they getting out of this?" And that sometimes takes an outsider's perspective to really nail down. Because when you're in it and your feelings are starting to get raw and this has been going on for a long time, you're just like, "No, this kid's a bad seed. I'm done. I'm out." And some you just have to get that other person to come in and say, "I was like, actually," or maybe it's something you never even thought of. Multiple times now I've been on a case where medication has been involved or allergy medicine has been a huge trigger. It's amazing the
Concussion.
things.
Concussion.
Russians, yes.
You're right. When they're coming off of steroids, when they
Mhm.
start an SSRI, I've had so many cases with concussions and steroids. So
Yeah.
many. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the
And
thing, and
schools are
until
like,
you've lived through it, you might not think about that. A team might not
no.
think about that. Right.
No,
So
I just had a this is funny. I just had a school board attorney say, "Well, Ashley, I mean, it seems like there's always an answer for everything." Like I say, "But the kid did this." And you're like, "Well, but the kid was just on a steroid." So I told my client, that he was like, "There's always an answer for it." And like, I just really think that our strategy now is to make them understand our child's profile and the effect of the profile, right? Like this is
mhm.
where we're going to focus our attention. Well, I guess my client told like an older child, like an old sibling, and the kid goes, "Well, that just means that our attorney's better than theirs."
Awesome.
And I was like, "Well,
That's
I don't know if that's true, but I do have a better understanding of human behavior."
yeah, and that's what it comes
Let's
down
stop
to.
there. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what else I think, and I'm also glad that you mentioned Kobe, I don't know if we were talking about this before we started to record. The snot in my head has affected my brain. I took a wrong turn on the way to Target. That's how badly this has
Whoa.
affected me. Can you believe
Whoa.
it?
I can barely comprehend that. I just
I
assumed
could
you could
not
get there in all state of being, like you could sleepwalk there.
I could not get from TJ Maxx to Target this morning. I
Yikes.
know. So, I can't remember if we talked about coping skills after record or before record, but right now we're gonna talk about coping skills. So, I agree with you that so much of this is founded in sensory processing behaviors and problematic behaviors, especially post-pandemic. But also, you and I have talked about how kind of across the board, kids are really struggling with coping skills. And when they're faced with some kind of trigger, we go from 0 to 60 real fast, or we go from like reasonable to like, wait a minute, where did that statement or action come from? That is not a reasonable reaction to whatever this trigger was. But I, as a grown up, and I have had many friends as grown-ups say, "You know what? I don't have any coping skills either. I also go from 0 to 60 right now. I also get real mad real quick." And so when you were just saying, like, we need an outside person to look at our kids' behavior, I think, A, that's a good reason to have an advocate because we do go 0 to 60, and I've seen myself do it, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to have my dad call Lowe's on this return policy because I'm gonna go postal on Lowe's." Or I'm gonna have to have my husband come in and bail me out of this parenting thing because I'm about to lose my mind. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
kinda wanna body slam him. That's
Mm-hmm.
what my imagination is I just pick up my kids and I, like, tackle them into, like, a crash pad. I've never
Yep.
done it.
No, I understand. I tell my toddler daughter all the time, the phrase I have coined when I am getting to my point, I was like, you know what? That's it. I'm going to feed you to a dolphin. Like she's obsessed with the dolphins that we see here in Charleston, South Carolina. I was like, that's it. I'm going to feed you to a dolphin. I'm done. I'm out. Like, that's it. She's like, no, don't feed me to a dolphin. And like that somehow resets us a little bit. But that you gotta have your way to get through it
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. My parents used to say they would put me back in the gumball machine because that's where my brother said I
That's
came
cute.
from, was a gumball machine. So they used to say they would put me back in the top of the gumball machine.
Father was going to return us to Kids R Us. He's like, you buy toys at Toys R Us, you buy kids at Kids R Us, right? They got to have a return policy. You're going back.
Yeah, he just
So,
went and picked up a couple.
yeah.
I'll tell you what, I would love to go to Russia and pick up a couple kids. I pick up
Mhm.
all the crazy ones with Down syndrome, and we would just have some kind of, like, colony of crazy fun people, and we dance a lot.
That would
If
be
I had
awesome. I'd visit.
unlimited money and time, and I've got a big heart for people that do that. So, okay, so adults with coping skills, right? Like, are you seeing that too, where you're like, "Wait a minute, that is not a reasonable way for a human to react to a stressor?"
I I think that as a whole, at this point, we have all experienced trauma, and that has
Mm,
reshaped our our way of life. You know,
mhm,
kids right now lived through a pandemic. Okay. Trauma has an impact on the brain and how we
mm,
process things. You live in fight, flight, freeze, whatever. And it literally changes the way your brain synapses connect and your response to outside information. So I think there's a trauma response as a whole. I think that our executive functioning skills, our resilience, uh, have really just tanked. I don't know if that's related to screen time, lack of outdoors, what I don't know what it is, but I see it all the time. Kids don't know how to bounce back from something. Adults don't know how to bounce back from something. We go into a shutdown response. And we live in a world where it's really easy to shut down. You sit there, you put on a screen, and you just tune out. You go binge Netflix for 10 hours, you know? We live in a world where it's socially acceptable to respond to something that way.
yeah,
So I think that we kind of cultivate it too as just as a culture, and so we're not taking the time to specifically teach. Oh, this is a way that we can respond when something goes wrong. How here's a different way we could have handled that, and teaching those specific social skills is beneficial to absolutely everyone, but particularly children with disabilities who
yep.
just might not have been born with the ability to foresee what their actions could have resulted in. And so it's that specific teaching of social skills that it all comes back to. So, and there's ways to do that really naturally in the home environment, in the school environment. It doesn't always have to be a curriculum. It's just sit there and, that's the thing.
Feel
So,
it. I had a behaviorist a couple weeks ago say, and that is like a colloquial term. I think she's a special educator like you that's just really good at behavior, but whatever she is, a person that is wise about behavior, say that when she was in the classroom, she used to do like the first month of exploration of alerting and calming sensory strategies. And so they would explore with the body socks and with the bubble machines and with some yoga and with some crash padding. And they would, kind of do it also like based on time of day or activity or subject or whatever it was. And she was like, kids, we can show them books all the time. Like, I'm feeling this way, and this is the strategy or the tool I need. But until they explore it and they mess around with it and they feel it, they aren't going to know how much it benefits them. And I thought, yeah, that's really it. And I've kind of been on both ends of that. Like I've had Jack try to explore too much and not like learn about something before he explores it. I know we would benefit from yoga, but I always just make him do yoga. I don't like talk to him about yoga, like why yoga's good. And he kind of needs that to buy in. But there's so many things that I'm like, oh, breathing. Well, he's been taught breathing 1,000 times, but does anybody ever model it for him? No, no, like it's not something that we put into everyday practice, and so therefore he's like, "This is a bunch of bull malarkey." So, like, I totally subscribe to what you're saying, and the trauma thing, like, I think so many people like, I have, like, really easy to see trauma, right? I was in a gasoline explosion when I was 15, and I broke 4 vertebrae, and I have chronic pain. Yes, I have PTSD, and I'm lucky enough that it stuck around, so mine's called chronic PTSD.
woohoo!
And then I have Jack, and then my husband's had cancer, and my adrenal system is just exhausted. But even if you were one of those people that kept like a fairly normal life during COVID, during like those first 12 or 18 months, the whole world was unraveling. Everybody hated somebody. Everybody hated some idea. You couldn't go somewhere. You had to wear different things. You had to wear a mask. You had to whatever. The whole world was different. So you could have tried to have a fairly normal life, but everywhere we went, there were these rules and this conflict and these changes and this risk or this like macho, oh, I'm not afraid of the risk. And so I think that even those people, they don't realize it, but even those people experience such a different life and lifestyle and mentality at that time that there's no way that we weren't experiencing trauma. And then you
Everyone
couple it
received
with
very vicarious traumatization. Everybody. Because
yeah,
even if you didn't feel like you were impacted, someone you know was impacted in some way. You could feel the stress of somewhere else. You saw it's all that was on the news. It changed the world. And
right.
so we all changed with that.
Mhm.
However, we want to accept that,
Yeah.
right?
And now we got to figure our way out of it and support kids that actually clinically were predisposed to unraveling more and more quickly than us. Yeah. Yeah. And that is why we're having our kids with DDs. That's why they're unraveling more. And our kids with your run of the mill ADHD, it's why they don't have coping skills. Don't you think?
Well, yeah. And I mean, as far as our student, like we had a disruption to the education system, right? We
Yeah.
had kids who didn't get to attend during fundamentally developmental years where you are learning to, don't push your friend in the sandbox. That's an important learning uh, opportunity that many kids didn't get. They skipped ahead to whatever the next grade is, or they participated in, emergency learning. And I will never say remote learning. I do believe remote learning works. However, emergency learning, where you have teachers who have taught in a building for 30 years and can barely operate a VCR, suddenly running online classes, that's not remote learning, that's emergency learning. And that wasn't high quality in many places.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it
We had high quality remote emergency learning for the first, that like March to May. And then we entered a classroom with VCR person.
right.
And I was
Oh
like,
dear.
oh, this is what America's complaining about.
So I mean, that's the thing. That really changed the educational trajectory for some of, especially our youngest kids. And we're
Yeah.
seeing it now. We're still feeling the effects of them not having had the opportunities that we've been continuously designing and improving upon throughout the history of our state of education.
Let's finish up with a rapid fire, not organized, not planned list of things that parents can do to help their kids start to work on their sensory regulation, work on their reaction to triggers, work on their coping skills. What are like 3, 4, 185 things that parents can do to be like, but I got one if you want to think.
Yeah, first of all, communicate with your child. Your child is an individual. Take the time to say, "How was your day?" Try to pull something out of them. Even if you don't get anything for a long time, if you ask at the same time every single day, assuming your child is verbal, they will eventually give you something. Every child will. Okay? So start the conversation. Make them feel valued at home so that if they had a hard day at school, they can come home and feel immediately safe in your presence. Try to build in routine. Routine is so important to students. Every single child out there loves the safety of a routine. Have some routine to your home. And if it's going to change from what they're used to, let them know about that in advance. It doesn't have to be that long in advance, but let them know we're going to go do something different right now. And here is why. I think that we don't always remember that our children are tiny human beings. They are people who want to understand the world. They're constantly seeking it and eventually will be adults, and they deserve explanations of what's going on too. So many times we expect compliance and them to just do what I said because I said it. No, most children will do what you want them to do if you explain the why. So take the time. Take the
Oh,
time
yeah.
to help them understand why, and they're going to go forward with you instead of fighting against you. Build in that quiet time at home, whatever that looks like for your child, whether, it's playing a board game, reading a book, coloring, just sitting in some quiet, de-stressing time. And even better if you can participate with them. It doesn't have to be long, it can be 10 minutes, but that's so important to building that long term safety and bond and development of a child. Uh, and if something goes wrong, remember that everybody makes mistakes, even yourself. So, do you always want someone to react at you with anger, or would you like them to react with understanding?
Right.
So, step back and say, big deal or little deal? Like, do I need to be really like loud and like, oh, I can't believe you did that? Or should I be saying, hey, it's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. Next time we'll try this. Right now, let's fix it by doing whatever, and then co-regulate with them, work through fixing whatever happened. Those are my 2-second spitballs off the top of my
Love it.
head.
I love it. And a strategy I thought about when you talked about how we can all like devolve by distracting ourselves with the box in our hand, right? Like
Mhm.
everybody right now reach to your well, you're watching us or listening to us on your box, but your phone's always within reach. If anybody in my house is upset, um, and they go for quiet time, the rule is anything that plugs in has to be in the hallway. You may not be I don't you may be upset about a bad practice or a bad grade or a rule that I enforced or your own sensory processing, but you go work through it without your phone, without AirPods. I do now allow music in an AirPod because, music.
Yeah, music.
Um, but you may not do it with a phone, and that has made a huge difference, and when I ask clients where they go when they need to decompress, they all say, "Well, I don't know, I guess I go up and play Minecraft," and I'm like, that is not a healthy way because we can distract ourselves, or we go play Russian roulette and we scroll through the internet and we don't know what we're gonna get, you don't know if it's gonna be super exciting, super sad, super empowering, it could be calming, but we don't know what we're gonna get, so that's one that I'll add
Yeah.
on there.
If you're distracting yourself, then you're not processing.
Right.
You need to put away the distraction to process whatever it is that you're feeling in order to move forward. You can't move forward without processing. So
Exactly.
yeah, put it
Yeah.
aside. Yeah, I like to say get a cup of tea. Get a hot beverage. Hot beverages will give you time to sit there and cuddle with something and process it and be ready to move forward by the end of your cup.
That's what Griffin and we drink hot drinks when we do our book club. We haven't done book club all year. We haven't needed to, but Griffin and I used to do book club, and we would read the same book, and then we would discuss it and have hot drinks. Mine had Bailey's in it.
I approve of your choice. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's part of parenting. I say all the time, I don't understand why you're not handed a case of wine upon giving birth. I'm pretty
Yeah,
confident that should be like the push person.
yeah. Tequila
Yeah.
solves a lot of problems.
It really does. Singing my song.
Okay, friend, I just think you're awesome, and I wanted to share your wisdom with the world. This was one of the very few guest interviews I have done with zero lists of questions because I knew that this really would be people speak in the same language, preaching to the choir. And I hope it was helpful to you all. If you want the conversation to continue, you are welcome to comment wherever you are listening or to reach out to Marissa or to me by DM on Instagram. Any closing? Why don't you tell people where they can find you on Instagram? Because you do have that fancy name.
I do. So right now my website is under construction, and that's Calm Seas, CalmSeas.org. And on Instagram, it's Calm Seas Team. And you'll find our logos cute and wavy. And seas, I live in Charleston, South Carolina. I adore the ocean. I am a transplant from the state of New York. So ocean life has just been amazing for me and for my family. So I wanted to kind of embody that calm seas thing. But SEAS actually stands for Special Education Advocacy and Supports. So we've got the whole calm seas vibes all wrapped up in our logo. But right now you can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, and on our website that's currently under development. So
Really good. Really, I wish I had thought of that because I really love it.
thank you. I don't know, you got the whole ABC thing going, so I'm usually pretty jealous of what you've got.
I know. I don't really like my monogram, but I took advantage of it with
Yep.
ABC. I know. Okay,
Awesome.
Marissa, thank you for joining us. You're amazing.
Thank you for having me. You're amazing as well.